Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 10 of Smash Through, the Smash podcast about always improving. I'm joined by my co-host, the man who invented coffee, Matt Kling.
I invented coffee? Wow. I feel like I should get a lot more credit for that.
I just assumed you did, since you have an unlimited supply.
I mean, just because I'm a fan doesn't mean that I'm the creator.
Oh, man. I'm just spreading lies on the internet, then. Dang. All right. Well.
Who would do such a thing?
I know. That would be wild. So today is episode 10, and I want to say we were doing a really good job doing this every month, and then we fell flat on our face.
Yeah, so I mean, certainly if it's only episode 10 now, I feel like we were, on episode 8 like at least 6 months ago.
Yeah, we definitely done goofed. Mostly it was because I got a new job. That's the real reason, for being honest. But I don't have a job anymore, so this is really easy to do. Let's dive in, though, and talk about always improving. This is the point of the show. We always want to be doing what we can to be improving in Smash. It's a tough game. It is actually really freaking hard. And we see that, and we're going to talk about like tournaments later, the tournaments that are happening later, Matt, and we see that across the board, across every level of play, how hard this game is. So I'm kind of curious, what have you been doing the last month or so to be improving in Smash?
Well, the last month or so, I've been having some wrist issues, and Smash has really been exacerbating those issues. So I've mostly been taking a break from Smash, but I think that that's honestly good advice for anybody that is having any kind of wrist issues. Like your health is just more important than anything. But yeah, my hands are starting to feel a little bit better, so I'm hoping to get back into the grind a bit. But
I gotta ask, I already know the answer, but I'd love you to talk to the listeners about this, of like, what have you done, or what is the doctor recommended, or like, what are the things to consider when having different wrist issues when playing a game like Smash?
I mean, it depends on what your issues are stemmed by. Usually there are a bunch of different exercises that you can do, like just like stretches of different varieties. For certain wrist issues, it can be like bracing, especially while you're sleeping, really helps. But yeah, it's just very case by case dependent.
Nice. Well, I'm glad that your wrist is feeling better. We got to play some Smash yesterday, which was really fun. I always enjoy kind of getting on with you and jamming. For me, I've been playing a lot more online lately, even more than I already was. And it has been really fun because I played kind of a wider variety of characters, adding some Bowser, PT, Greninja back in the mix, and really trying to do a lot of different things. Incorporate the full kits of characters a lot more. And part of this actually came from, I don't think that we were doing the podcast when I started my Edgeguard training, where I would play against a level 2 or 3 CPU and just only get kills by edgeguarding. Like, that's all I would do. And it was surprising how well that worked, and we'll talk about it a little bit later, but incorporating that also made me incorporate, like, different moves to try and get them into different situations so that I could get them off the stage, right? Mm-hmm. Rather than just, constantly back throwing them or whatever, It's, playing against a character that is moving and will react to you, but is not going to attack you, really opens you up to, like, being able to, like, practice, like, getting in flow of just the movement of your characters. It's really cool. And I think through that, I've seen significant results in the ways that I'm able to get kills. One thing that maybe isn't on my list when we get into our main topic today, that probably should be, is knowing your win conditions. Is something that I think in Smash is maybe not talked about enough. Of like, okay, what is your win condition that you're playing towards in this specific situation? And I feel like I've gotten a lot better at that in the last month.
Yeah, I think you can even take that a step further too, into knowing your opponent's win conditions. I mean, obviously that requires a lot more knowledge of the game, but I feel like that's a lot of where I get my percentages, just knowing what my opponent is going to go for at certain percents to try to if you don't let your opponent have their easy win conditions, it becomes a lot harder. You end up
Yeah.
living much longer than you normally could.
Yeah, I think, just like a really good example of this is I think a lot of people talk about how much they hate Ness because of back throw
Mhm.
or PK fire into bat. And I think that if you just know that that's what they're going to fish for, right, it becomes a lot easier to break down the game and decide like what moves do I have available to me to play through that.
Mhm.
So,
Yep, definitely.
well, let's go into our main topic this week. We are going to talk about tips and tricks for Smash and Smash Ultimate specifically in 2023. Matt, I think we got some good ones here. Some of them a little bit similar, some of them a little bit different. But I'm going to let you go first. You got some here, and your first one is save your resources. When you say save your resources, what are you kind of telling the listeners here?
Well, the number one thing that you see a lot of people doing, it's because it's very intuitive, is to just like jump immediately when you get hit in a disadvantage. And this is an option that can be good, but it normally isn't. It shouldn't be your default option. The more resources that you have when you're going back to ledge, the more that you can avoid the things that your opponent wants to do. Like mixing up timings getting to ledge, even like to avoid 2 frames, or being able to avoid any kind of edge guard is way more possible if you save all of your resources. Like getting back to the ledge safely with as few resources as possible is like a big step in the game.
I actually really like that you said get back to ledge instead of get back to stage, because I think the other thing that happens here is people will use it and then they won't even be able to get to ledge. Right? They'll waste a resource and then they're forced to go to stage rather than to ledge. If you want, like, it depends on what you want, but it gives your opponent that information of like, okay, well now they're forced to go here and I can just easily punish them.
Right.
So
Yeah.
I like that one a lot.
Yeah. It's certainly some of it is character specific, right? Like with let's say Pikachu or something. You don't necessarily have to go to ledge as often as other characters, but yeah, I guess that's a good point. In general, I think people don't go to ledge enough. Like, and it's obvious why. Being on the ledge is like a disadvantaged position. It sucks, Like if you can just get to center stage for free, it's way better. But
yeah, but
it's also
way
a
harder.
lot harder to do that. Yeah, yeah.
Well,
And not harder in that you have to be better to do it. It's harder in that your opponent has to be worse to let you back to stage most of the time.
Yeah, and to be honest, like, if you're using a specific, like, it depends on the resource, but like if you're using your resources mid stage, right, you have less options on where to go, whether it be to ledge or to stage or to plat or wherever you're trying to get to, and your opponent has, is going to be able to have that information. Let's go into your next one, which is count your opponent's resources.
Yeah, this kind of ties into the other one, but for edge guarding especially, if you can see that your opponent has no resources other than their up B or their double jump or whatever, then you know what trajectory they have to take to get to the ledge or back to stage or whatever. Like the less resources that they have, the more you know where their recovery can go. So like this is one thing that I think is told to people pretty early, if you notice your opponent doesn't have a jump, do this. But I think it has to be a lot more conscious than you would expect. Like it took me a long time to start noticing when my opponent doesn't have their double jump and reacting accordingly. And I think that if I had put more effort into tracking that kind of thing, it would have increased my improvement drastically.
Well, I think that it's also another one of those things that's obviously character specific too. I remember for a while you had like a really hard time with people with triple jumps.
Mm-hmm.
And, understanding not just what your opponent's resources are, but what a resource is, like not just counting the resources, but like what resource they have available in different situations. This is going to be kind of one of my tips and tricks, and I think that it applies really well when you combine your two to that.
Well, I think more than that, another problem that I had a lot was that I would just like, and I see a lot of players do this too. Like if you're playing a character like, say you're playing Lucina, a character that really thrives on getting edge guards. People will often tend to drop down from ledge to try to get the edge guard before they even realize that their opponent still has their double jump. Like if you drop down from ledge to try to get the the back air or the fair or whatever to try to get the edge guard and your opponent just jumps over you, Now you just lost stage. Now your opponent just gets to walk back to the center of the stage for free, and now you're getting ledge trapped.
Totally fair. Your next one is time is valuable, spend it wisely.
Yeah, so this one is mostly just about the differences between practice and just playing a game for fun. Like I tend to play games that I'm interested in a lot, so it's not always possible to play every second like it counts, you know? But the more time that you can spend actively practicing and trying to figure out what you need to do to get better, is valuable. Like at the end of the day, you will get better slowly just by playing the game, but it's not even close to comparable to the growth that you'll experience if you're actively trying to get better at something.
I love that. I think that that's something we preach on our sister podcast, Constructive Criticism, a lot of like being an active participant in your games and what that does for you. And, you know, also putting yourselves in situations more often where your decisions matter. And so that when you have a decision that matters later, it becomes a lot easier to navigate. And in Smash, like, you know, one of the things that people told me when I was starting to play is like, oh, you just need to go to tournaments. Like, it's definitely, it's so different to play in a tournament where the pressure's on immediately. You're going to O2 a lot and it's going to suck, but like, you're going to vastly improve and learn in that situation more than any other situation. And for us, like, you know, we mostly started playing like during the pandemic. And so it wasn't actually possible for us to start playing that way. And, you know, it's there are only so many opportunities for me as a dad to like go out, you know, and hit up a local. But, you know, if I had time, I might, if my wife was not gone tomorrow, I was going to play in the coin box. I was actually gonna pop it off, but
nice. Yeah, and then my next one is just because it wins doesn't mean it's good. This mostly, it kind of ties into like cheesing your opponents out, but it's not necessarily just that. Like you can develop bad habits that technically work at lower levels, but it's important to keep in mind that you should be trying to play optimally if you're trying to improve. If your goal is to win against your friends, there are lots of ways to do that. If your goal is to get better at the game, there are far less options that you should be looking for.
Yeah, I think a lot about like playing K. Rool and just like crown cannon stuff. And like the crown is really, really good. But the crown is actually, the cannon's actually kind of situational. And while it's really good if you've never played against crown cannon before, and you're just kind of like, oh my gosh, I'm getting dumpstered, I don't know. Like, I don't know the defense for this, or like even the approach options for this. The second somebody learns it, that cannon becomes a lot worse. So while you were kicking your friend's butt with that cannon, eventually it's going to stop working.
Yeah, I think one thing that I would kind of tie it to is like using counters in neutral. Like that's the kind of thing that will work a lot at lower levels because it's does take a different kind of playstyle to actually beat that kind of thing, like or counter at a disadvantage, right? Like your opponent's going for a bunch of combo strings that don't technically work because you know they don't know how to play their character. That's the kind of thing that will get you a long way, but will never make you better at the game. And I think that my mentality.
MK Layer's Joker wants a word with you.
Well, Joker's a different story.
I'm just kidding.
But I will say that my mentality going into a game is always to play the best that I can, never really to get the most wins that I can. And I think that especially when we first started playing, like, it felt like I was losing a lot more than I needed to, just because I was not willing to take any shortcuts when we first started. And like compare that to our friend Mason or whatever, where he would just like spam Captain Falcon up B because we just kept getting hit by it constantly. And I think that there's some value in that for having friends that do that for you.
There is.
But as far as like, that's never going to get Mason better at the game to just like spam
Yeah,
up B over
this
and
is a
over
lesson
again.
that we've been trying to teach, my son Maxwell, right? Like he finally is throwing out other things in the air other than down air with Bowser. But I
Mhm.
mean, it took us a long time to be like. He's like, yeah, but like when I play versus the computer, like it wins, Dad. And it's like, yeah, I totally understand that. But like the second that you start throwing it out every move, like we're just gonna play around it.
Right.
And I mean, now Maxwell will, he understands that like he needs to incorporate an air and forward air, and back air into his game. But it took getting him a smaller controller so that he could more easily execute aerials, and like really us having to punish him a lot for
Mhm.
always throwing out those downward options.
Yep.
I mean, he's 6, but it's still a valuable lesson.
Yes, I mean, honestly, it's a good time to learn anything, really.
Next up, you have the value of disengaging.
Yeah, so this really comes down to the idea that Smash is a turn-based game, and it kind of is in some ways, right? Like your opponent does something, and then you use your defensive option and then try to punish it, right? The problem is there are many characters in the game where that just doesn't work. That's not a real option. Like if we look at for example, Mario doing safe aerials on shield, Cloud doing back airs on shield, Mithra doing almost anything. The problem is you can't actually punish these characters in traditional means. So rather than trying to always parry or find the perfect out of shield option or whatever, sometimes it's just better to accept that they hit your shield and that you just need to back away and then reset to neutral. And I think that is hard to understand when you first start playing the game. That you feel like if your opponent does an option and you read it and you countered it with some kind of a defensive option, that you should be able to engage and have an advantaged position. But that's not always the case. And sometimes the best way to approach that situation is just to go straight back to neutral and make them try to find a spot again where they can do something like that.
I really love this one. I was watching Port Priority 8 VODs yesterday, and Light actually was getting these footstools, and Light and Leo were getting these footstools to specifically disengage from the current interaction. And I don't know that I'd ever seen one. It was crazy to see Light do it in the Fox Ditto, but it also was just interesting of like, okay, these people are using a tool that they have practiced a lot, specifically for probably their offensive options, right? Like a lot of the reason that you'll do footstools is to like get specific types of combo setups. And Kayla was just using it to literally say, I want to disengage from this situation, and this is a way for me to get back to center stage. And it kind of goes to show that even like very aggressive characters, and players, in all honesty, like Leo, maybe more bait and punish than aggressive, but still is focusing on a different thing that maybe I would be focusing on in that situation if somebody hit my shield and then shielded, or whatever the case may be.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and at some point, even if you are in a spot where you could potentially take a 50-50, if you think that your neutral is stronger than your opponent, it can still be better to just disengage.
Yeah. This is something that came up yesterday. I don't remember what matchup we were playing. I was playing Wolf, and you like took like the first stock of mine, and I just had to reset. I was like, I need to stop getting in the scrum of things, because so often when I'm playing against Matt, I'm trying to get trades with Wolf because he's playing, ZSS, and it's usually beneficial for me to get trades. And kind of having to break that mindset of like, okay, it's not worth it to get a trade in this situation. I actually need to just reset until I have, can get into an advantageous state.
Mm-hmm.
I don't remember what matchup we were playing, but I remember yesterday specifically thinking about this. And then your last one.
My last one is, what does spacing mean? Because it's the term that gets thrown around a lot when you're watching, coverage or anything else. Like people just talking about the game, everybody will talk about, oh, what good spacing this person has. But like, so yeah, I really only learned what spacing is fairly recently. And obviously, if you have longer, range than your opponent in the air or on the ground, you can just stand outside of your opponent's threat range, and that's good spacing. But for me, what spacing really means is like understanding what your opponent wants to approach with, and you can kind of time around it, right? Like a good example is Zero Suit's bear is like pretty long and pretty fast, but not so long or so fast that it beats everybody else's options in the air. But what you can do is you can kind of, while in the air approaching somebody, you can kind of drift it in certain directions and let their aerial miss first and then get yours underneath. And it's kind of a form of spacing that just comes from playing a lot and understanding how interactions work for your character and like for your opponent's character. But that to me is what spacing really is. Like, you'll be playing, at least for me, I'll be playing a game and I'll notice sometimes that I can just beat out all of my opponent's options, not because my options just win, but because I can just put myself in the right spot to avoid their aerial and then drift in to hit mine.
Yeah, I love it. No, that makes a ton of sense. And I always think of when Hbox came out, was like, oh, I got this bubble theory. And then he like explained bubble theory at Summit. You're like, that's just spacing. It's like, yeah, I'm like trying to not let people into my bubble while I'm trying to poke their bubble. And it's like, yeah, that's spacing, man. You're just describing spacing.
Right.
So it's funny. I guess I'll go next, unless there's anything you want to kind of wrap up with on yours.
I don't think I have anything necessarily to add to mine, but I am definitely interested to see what you have here and talk about, what we have that's similar and what's different.
Yeah, so my first one was understand your resources. The way I wrote this is not only like how many jumps do you have, but also what resource is the best in different situation. So for example, like your upbeat is its own resource, right? Your air dodge, your even something as simple as a spot dodge is a resource that you have available to you in any given situation. Your shield is a finite resource that you have in a given situation. So like understanding, for example, like Pikachu's shield is a lot better than K. Rool's shield. And understanding how to use and when to use K. Rool's shield, or when to use K. Rool's super armor, or when to throw out an attack, for example. Like, it might be actually better for you to actually just throw out an air than ever spot dodge if your opponent is in front of you with K. Rool. And that is character specific to the point where, like, I need to know this to the point of what I'm doing so that I'm not wasting the finite resources that I do have.
Yeah, this is actually pretty interesting too. I was recently watching The Art of Meta Knight. Shoutouts to Izza if you haven't checked him out. I highly recommend it.
I feel like we do that every 2 episodes.
Yeah, he's great though. I don't know. And anyway, he was showing a style of playing Meta Knight that basically just involved just being straight above your opponent and just like using all of his jumps, because Meta Knight has so many jumps and has a down air that you can just like kind of space with above your opponent, or just like take space, I guess, like your opponent can't approach it necessarily. Sure. And I felt like that was really interesting, because normally that's something that people will start out the game trying to do with every character, right? Like it's very common for people to just be like, oh, I'm going to jump and then use my double jump over you and then try to approach with a down air or whatever, right?
Yeah.
And it's usually really bad. But in the case of Meta Knight, where you have so many jumps, like your opponent has to really guess when you're going to come down, right? The problem with only having 2 jumps is that when you jump, your opponent goes, or like feigns going for something, you use your double jump, now you have nothing. Now you just like literally have to try to fall with an aerial or an air dodge. And in the case of Meta Knight, you still have so many mix-ups from that spot. Right. So it really does come down to just understanding your specific character resources and realizing that just because something is, a heuristic doesn't mean that it's always correct.
Yeah, I think that so many things that we learn when we first start Smash like apply to people like Lucina and Mario and Wolf. And then you're like, you get in there with like Ness, and you're like, none of this makes any sense. Like this or Cloud, right? Like you try and just do everything that you do with Lucina with Cloud, and you're like, okay, this is, I need to be like cross slashing to like change my momentum or like air drifting way earlier, like all the kinds of stuff. That it's not just understanding your character though, right? Because like I think that's pretty simple. Like that's something that you should do. But if you're going to learn someone, you need to be able to know what resource to use in what situation. That goes beyond just knowing your offensive options, which is what I think a lot of people start to focus on.
Mm-hmm.
My second one is find different ways to practice. This is, I think, actually really valuable in a game like Smash Ultimate. And I think it's valuable for a few reasons. One, training mode sucks. Not just like the options available to you and like the software itself kind of sucks. But I think that depending on the type of person you are, it could be a really hard way for you to learn, even though it's really important. Like you should eat your vegetables sometimes. Earlier in the episode, I talked about how I was practicing edge guarding. Because, like, how do you practice edge guarding in training mode, Matt?
I mean, I think so.
The character's just going to automatically.
You can't totally practice edge guarding. Although, to be fair, there are a lot of Bs that you can just like beat out with.
Yeah, sure.
But for me at least, what I did mostly in training mode was just become as comfortable as possible off stage.
Yeah,
like just try to go as low as you can. Try to do all your different things. Like, I mean, Zero Suit, for example, has like 5 wall jumps. So like I'll just like drop all the way to the blast zone and use all my different resources to get up in unique ways. But
yeah, and that's another creative way to use the game and the things in front of you to practice. I think that I've seen people. I saw a video of something like, oh, I created a custom stage specifically to practice these things with like to practice wall cling, for example, was like they wanted to like be able to jump from wall to wall with Greninja. And I don't know, that's just like you don't have to just be in a box when you're training and when you're practicing. Find different and unique ways to practice is a tip I would give people.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I mean, and I like that you highlighted it's a lot of it is just because, as important as getting in the lab and just practicing things can be, it can also be very boring and taxing on you mentally. And like, if you burn out, then it doesn't matter how good you got in that hour or whatever.
Yep.
So yeah, I like that, a part of this is just keeping it interesting.
Yeah. My next one is find ways to reflect in-game on what is happening. The game moves fast, and if you don't find a way to understand what's happening and working and not working, you can fall behind if you don't make the adjustments. This sounds really simple, but I actually think it's really hard to figure out ways to reflect on what's happening at the speed in which Smash requires it. Because it means a couple of things. One, it means that you have to have some things down so well that you can be thinking about other things while executing, or while disengaging, or while being effective. And then if you can't, finding ways to gain that time to reset. And we had a whole podcast on that, but I think it's really important.
Yeah, I definitely agree. And I think I brought this up last time we were talking about it in our episode-specific topic. But what helps for me a lot is kind of just narrowing the focus of the game a lot. It's really hard if you're like, okay, what are all the possible things that could be going well and going poorly for me? Right. Versus, okay, what do I notice my opponent doing in the last 5 seconds? What have they done? And I'm like, okay, that's the move that I'm going to try to punish. That's the thing that I can see that I know how I can try to get around and try to capitalize on next time.
I love it. Breaking it down to something simple is so much better. It's like turning it into algebra instead of an individualized piece of your algebra problem instead of looking at the entire problem at once can be really helpful. Mm-hmm. Yeah, my next one is learn both defense and offense. I kind of mentioned this earlier in this episode, but so many people just go and learn their offense. And the second that you do that and you don't know what to do when you need to be defensive, you're going to get bodied. Like, it's actually not going to be very close. And I think that to be fair, I think there are also players like me that gravitate towards defense, right? Like, I think that I was a person that felt like I needed to be a defensive player more. And I think that, there are a lot of people that works for, right? Like, you look at somebody like, oh my gosh, what's his name? Who's the Rosalina player?
DeBuzz?
Yeah, thank you. You look at something like DeBuzz, they've built an entire career on being a defensive player that, throws out very large hitboxes and, just spaces well, right? But I think that if you were to play against DeBuzz and you only knew your offense and he could execute his offense better, he could easily just dumpster you with offense. So,
yeah, I think that a balance of both is really important. And honestly, learning your offense is almost more important if you are a defensive player, I think. Because the problem is that you are going to make games reset to neutral so often that when you actually get those hits, you need to know what to do with them.
Yeah.
Like, if you are a defensive player and your plan is just, do whatever my out of shield option is and then back away from my opponent and then let them try to do neutral again, like, that's a hard way to go. You really need to get the most out of every neutral win that you get if you're going to play defensively. Whereas if you're playing offensively, like, the thing is, you get so many more opportunities to make things happen, right? Like, and we can cite examples of top players that gravitate towards each, right? Like, if you look at Spargo or Light or a lot of these other very aggressive players, like, they are just mostly all gas and no brakes, like, and you can just see how many more opportunities they get to make something happen. So, like, it's not as big of a deal if they, don't get full value out of whatever they're doing.
I mean, just to use the opposite of those players. Somebody like Tweak is a very defensive player, right? And you watch Tweak, and to your point, Tweak gets a banana hit, and it's like, oh, my stock.
Yeah, his combos are just you're
insane. Like, my stock is gone. What just happened?
Well, and honestly, I would actually look at Sonics versus Ken in this way too, right? Like, I think that they both can be offensive or defensive, right? Obviously, like, but what I find very interesting is, like, how much more optimized Sonic's advantage state is, and it really shows. Like, every time Sonics gets the hit, like, the opponent is, like, almost dead. You're just like, I never seen a Sonic get so many 0 to 60s and, like, so many kills below 100. Like, this is actually wild.
My last one is understand out of shield. Learning out of shield stuff is probably one of the most important things to start the game. If you drop shield with an unsafe option or can't punish your opponent hitting your shield, I think you're in pretty big trouble. It's funny, like, the amount that there are kind of like three levels, I think, to this. There is, there's the level of, like, what are my options out of shield so that I can, punish my opponent hitting it? What are my opponent's options out of shield so that I can hit them with a safe option? Right? Like, you think about the reason that people really like different moves is because they can hit your opponent's shield, and they're really likely not to be able to hit you back. And I think it's a huge part of the game that if you don't understand both the mechanics of it, how it works, what the frame drop, what the shield drop rate is, what your options are, you're gonna be at a disadvantage, and your opponents are going to be able to take advantage of you in shield, and they're going to you're not going to be able to hit them when they shield.
Yeah, definitely. I agree with this, and I think even for, like, intermediate players, a lot of times they don't actually know a lot about shield drop stuff. Like, I know I've specifically had to talk to people about what, like, shield grab frame data is not even too long ago. People that have certainly played the game enough that I would have expected them to know about it.
Oh, dude, definitely me. Like, if you asked me that question right now on the air, I would be like, isn't it two extra frames?
I think it's 4, but I'm also not 100%.
4?
Yeah.
I thought it was 2 extra. Okay. See?
So, yeah, I think that this stuff is really important. And I think it depends a little bit on the character, how disadvantaged you are using your out of shield option, right? Like if you look at Game & Watch or whatever, like you can probably be out of shield and it's probably going to be fine.
It's just fine.
Yeah. Like it's not like he's guaranteed to win because he's up being out of shield, right? But the flip side is that it's, he's not really in disadvantage when he's in his up B animation either, because he's free to move and has really amazing drift and can just come down with key or whatever. Like there's plenty of mix-ups for Game & Watch from that position.
I mean, there's some characters. There's some characters it's super easy for, right? Like you look at Ridley and Greninja, and it's like, oh, you don't have one, so stop trying to shield.
Yeah, and if you look at like Zero Suit, right? Like in theory, she has this great up B out of shield, right? Even after the nerf, it's frame 6 option that kills at 80, right? Sounds pretty great, but like the hitbox is so small, and she's just actually dead if you miss it. So I think that they're
inside your shield.
Yeah. So yeah, I think that one ties into both understanding your own out of shield options and also understanding your opponent's, right? Like if I'm playing against a Zero Suit, I'm not trying to get hit by that, because a lot of Zero Suits, even top level Zero Suits will fish for that up B out of shield because it's a good thing to do. Like if you can get it, it's a free stock most of the time.
It's funny because I'll be playing against Matt and Max will be watching, and we'll be thinking around, like not really playing as hard as we normally would when Matt and I are focused. And I'll hit Matt's shield with something on the front of his shield, and Matt will up B. I'll be like, yeah, I deserved that. That was my fault.
Yeah,
and that's because I know not to do it.
There are also other options too that I think are kind of interesting. Like, I mean, I've never played against a wolf that used up B out of shield as much as you do, and it's so hard to punish.
I hope that I've never used up B out of shield.
Or sorry, I meant up smash. I honestly, I think up B out of shield is not a terrible option in some spots. I've seen good wolves use that in certain creative ways, but
anyway, up smash out of shield.
Yeah, that's a move that you really have to understand matchup specifically, because it not only has an insane hitbox, lingers forever, and catches both sides, but also it like kind of pushes you away in weird ways that makes it very hard to punish. Like the only way that I have found to punish it with Zero Suit is forward tilt out of shield, which sounds crazy, right? Because first of all, you're getting the 11 frames of shield drop from just dropping shield. And then also the startup of whatever her forward tilt is, which I don't think is like obnoxiously fast. I think it's
his contortionist body helps a lot with this too, for what it's worth.
Sure, yeah, I'm sure that's true. But my point is that it's not necessarily about finding a fast out of shield option to try to punish this up smash, because the up smash is actually wildly unsafe on shield. It's just where it actually positions each player that is the problem that makes it very hard to punish, right? Yeah. I wish I could find this data on forward tilt. Yeah, forward tilt is frame 6. That's what I thought it was. So it's 17 frames to actually forward tilt wolf, but it's also 100% to work. And it's not admittedly the biggest punish because Zero Suit doesn't get any follow-ups off of forward tilt, but when you compare it to just
getting hit by up smash,
yeah, getting hit by another up smash, right? Like oftentimes up smash into up smash is like a pretty reasonable option if your opponent's trying to punish you with forward air out of shield or nair out of shield or even up B's out of shield.
Yeah. All right, that is going to do it for this week's main topic. Let's dive into some tournament talk though, Matt, because we got Watch the Throne coming up, which I plan on watching that with you. I'm gonna put it on my family calendar. We're gonna watch together. Have get our Rockstar and our coffee. Wake up in the morning, watch together. It's gonna be a great little watch party for us. But also, it's like Summit is back. It feels like in some ways, which I'm really excited for. How are you feeling about like the? I mean, first of all, I don't know if we talked since Sonic qualified, but I think Sonic had not qualified last time we talked.
Yeah, I don't think so. Yeah, I'm thrilled to see Sonic's qualify. He's honestly one of my favorite players. I know that's probably not a super popular opinion, but like just watching the way he plays, he's amazing. Like every time I watch him, I'm like, oh man, he could win this thing. And like he made that true yesterday or the other day.
Well, speaking of the other day, the newest person to qualify was Ken.
That's what I was just going to ask. I was curious, did they only have one spot for port, or was it two?
It was one spot.
Okay.
So port priority, Ken, another Sonic qualified.
Yep. think my tier list is looking better and better all the time.
So what do you think? We have the old guard, right? We've got MK Leo and Tweak. We've got the new guard in Spargo and Akola and Mia. And Sonic's in a lot of ways. If we
my hot take right now is that the 3 best players in the world are Aquila, Mia, and Sonics. So
there you go. Yeah, just to be clear, like the voted in players are Tark. So we've got a Greninja. We've got WebJP. WebJP is a
Sheik.
Okay, a Sheik. Well, I love a good Sheik play. Kurama, Louis Money, Ken. Those are the voted in players. Then qualified players are Ken, Sonics, Mia, DeBuzz from tournament qualifications, and invited players are Gloomy, Bloom Forever, Akola, Tweak, Light, Spargo, and MK Leo.
Is that the final list of everybody, or is there another qualifier?
That is everyone qualified.
Okay.
How do you feeling? You feel like one of your 3 are going to take it down?
I'd be honestly pretty surprised if they didn't. Like, I think Mia and Aquila are so consistent, and then Sonics has just shown that he can beat both of them back to back. So.
Yeah, my favorites to win this event would be. It might be those 3. It might be those 3.
Who here do you like against Sonics for that matter? Now that now that we're talking about it, like. It's not like they even had particularly competitive sets. Like Mia or Aquila are gonna have to have some huge adaptation to make that competitive.
I personally like tweaking the smaller field for what it's worth. I think that him being able to focus in on specific matchups will be really helpful for him. Also, I think that.
He and Spargo trade sets a lot, slightly favoring Spargo at the moment for sure. But.
I think that Banana is really good against Sonic, despite what Sonic says. But
do you think so?
Yeah.
Fair enough.
I could be wrong. Are you? I gotta ask though. I haven't finished watching Port Priority 8 yet. Probably watch some more today. But are you pretty happy with the most stacked Smash tournament ever? You were such an MK Leo hype man before, and having him not win that must have hurt your heart a little.
I'd love to see MK Leo win. But the truth is, there's just a lot of people that are really good at the game right now. It's tough when you lose a match in winners to a top 10 player, and then now all of a sudden you have to play another top 10 player in losers for 17th. You're like, okay, well, it's just tough out there,
Yeah, it's brutal out there, as Olivia Rodrigo says. I love it. I'll tell you who I'm rooting for. I'm going to give you my rooting interest, like my top 3. I'm rooting for Tweak, obviously, Kurama for Maxwell, and Tarek. I would love Secret Ninja win something like this.
Fair enough. I love to see Sonics win just because I know that he has a bunch of haters, and I just love.
Dude, it's
them.
so rude. Like people are like, it's so rude. Well, that is gonna do it. If you want to find me, you can find me at Heezy Game on Twitter. If you want to find Matt, you can sneak into his house. Here's his address.
Just dox me here.
No, just kidding. I don't know. He gets to a certain number of followers on Twitter. I bet he'll tweet again. You just gotta follow him at The Witch Plane.
If I get 1 million followers on Twitter, I'll tweet.
Don't forget to check out the rest of Heezy Game Media, whether it is the Need to Nerd podcast with Patty B, Constructive Criticism with the Mason E. Clark and the amazing Ape Stein, or Drafting Archetypes with Sam Black. That is going to do it. Like, comment, and subscribe. And then if you want to sponsor the podcast, hit us up. Smash3pod@gmail.com. Let's go. Bye.